Welcome again. We've just covered the three covenants, all centering around the Feast of First Fruits and Passover. Now we're going to the Day of Atonement and the last three feasts of the sanctuary year. Up here I have put, once again, the graph of the entire sanctuary year. It's well that you become familiar with it if you don't already understand it. Over here we have once again the first feasts, round of feasts, then we have the second in early June, and then over here we have the third round in the fall of the year. Going down below here, you can see this large circle. If I can get that right, this large circle stands for the solar year, whereas a smaller circle inside of it is representative of the sanctuary year, likening once again to a school year of 9 months. Only the sanctuary year was 6 months and 22 days, totaling 199 days, all told up. And we're going to be referring to that 199 a little later on in this study. So, beginning with the Day of Atonement. Why we're beginning with the Day of Atonement? It's the key to the door. We know when 1844 was. We know when the Day of Atonement was, both prophetically and sanctuary pattern. This is the graph of the fall festivals blown up so you can see it easier. And I'll just step back a little bit so that I'm not in front of it. We have over here trumpets, which happened on the first day of the month of Tishri. 6 months prior to this was the first day of Nisan. Then we have 10 days later, the Day of Atonement, counting 5 days to the Feast of Booths and the 15th. Now the Feast of Booths ran 7 days to the 22nd day. So all told, we have basically 3 feasts, but we have 4 listed. Reading once again from the Spirit of Prophecy, Great Controversy 399 and 400. Chapters entitled Prophecies Fulfilled. I know I've read this before to you, but it is so timely that I really think we need to keep this one in mind. The slaying of the Passover lamb was a shadow of the death of Christ. These types were fulfilled not only as to the event, but as to the time. On the 14th day of the first Jewish month, the very day and month on which for 15 long centuries the Passover lamb had been slain, Christ, having eaten the Passover with his disciples, instituted that feast which was to commemorate his own death as the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. That same night he was taken by wicked hands to be crucified and slain, and as the antitype of the wave sheaf, our Lord was raised from the dead on the 3rd day. In like manner, the types which relate to the second advent must be fulfilled at the time pointed out in the symbolic service. Under the Mosaic system, the cleansing of the sanctuary, or the Great Day of Atonement, occurred on the 10th day of the 7th Jewish month, 1844, our key to unlocking the last 3 feasts. Now we're going to read about the Day of Atonement from Leviticus as God gave to Moses. Leviticus 23, 26 to 32. And as the Lord said to Moses, on the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be for you a time of holy convocation, and you shall afflict yourselves, and present an offering by fire to the Lord. And you shall do no work on this same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whoever is not afflicted on the same day shall be cut off from his people, and whoever does any work on this same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest. and you shall afflict yourselves on the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening. From evening to evening shall you keep your Sabbath. Now here we have the Day of Atonement prophetically set up as in Daniel 8 and 9. We went through this just in the previous segment, but I'd like to recap it. There are some really astonishing things in this, as in all of the Lord's Bible. But once again, we see the 2300-year prophecy of Daniel 8:14. Then we see cut out of that 1810 years, which takes us to the Day of Atonement in 1844. Investigative judgment begins. But going back before, we have the 490 years or 70 weeks of 7 of Daniel 19:24, and we have the 483 years or the 69 weeks of Daniel 9:26-27. Also in that is 1 Peter 2:22. I'd like to read what Daniel 8:14 says. And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. And we know that it was misunderstood as being the second coming back in 1844, but then realized that it was, in fact, the investigative judgment. For the day-year principle, you'll find that in Ezekiel 4:6 and Numbers 14:34. Now I'd like to read to you from Daniel 9:24-27. This refers back again to the Feast of Weeks or the Feast of First Fruits, and I'll point that out to you if you don't get it. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now you see that 7 weeks is set apart. Why didn't he just say there shall be 69 weeks? Well, because that 7 weeks was set apart to indicate and to point at the Feast of Weeks, the first fruits. Then added to the 62 weeks, equaling the 69 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. That 1 week period was the period of Christ's ministry, his death, and then gospel going to the Gentiles. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. The 7 weeks mentioned above have their reference in the Feast of First Fruits, 7 weeks of Sabbath to the 49th Sabbath, and first fruits on the 50th. This brings us to the Feast of Trumpets. Now we know 1844 was the Day of Atonement. But what is the Feast of Trumpets? That came just before, 10 days before. Let's read about it. Numbers 29, 1 and 2. On the first day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. It is a day for you to blow the trumpets. And you shall offer a burnt offering, a pleasing odor to the Lord, 7 male lambs, a year old, without blemish. Now the blowing of the trumpets, that happened monthly. At every new moon, they blew the trumpets to sound to all the nation that the first of the month had come. This is how they kept their calendar from month to month to month. But the 7th month, the first day of the 7th month, that was a special one. That was set aside as a type of Sabbath. You shall do no laborious work. The SDA Bible Commentary, Volume 1, page 805, verse 24, concerning blowing the trumpets. On the first day of the 7th month was a Sabbath, and holy convocation was to be held. On that day the trumpets were blown, for the Day of Atonement was near at hand, and the first 9 days of the month were to be days of preparation for it. So you see, the first 9 days before the Day of Atonement were preparation for the Day of Atonement. Let's calculate trumpets. 10 days. 10 times 33.898 equals 338.98 years. 1844 minus 338.98 equals 1505. What happened in 1505 and onward? This is exciting. The Feast of Trumpets, antitype in history, the Great Reformation. July 2, 1505. What happened to Martin Luther? Luther had been visiting his parents on July 2, 1505. On his way back to the University of Erfurt, where he was about to embark on the study of law, a sudden and severe thunderstorm struck. The storm was so vicious that Luther became afraid. When a bolt of lightning struck a tree so close to Luther that it knocked him to the ground, Luther uttered the vow, "Save me, St. Anne, and I will become a monk." That really reminds you of Paul on the way to Damascus, doesn't it? Where he saw the Lord and it changed his whole life and his whole direction. Let's look at this. The Great Reformation was a preparation for 1844 movement. It opened the door for the Bible to be preached as well as printed. It was a call to holiness and a turning away from the worldliness that prevailed Christendom. It was a time of preparation for the first and second angel's message. The hour of judgment has come, the heavenly Day of Atonement proclaimed on earth. And if you'll look at that chart, you will see step by step by step all the different truths that were born during that period of time, all leading up to the Advent movement with William Miller and the 1844, the first and second angels' messages given, and then the Seventh-day Advent, the Seventh-day Sabbath found. What a blast of trumpet! What a loud noise was made for those 338 years. Praise the Lord. Now comes the Feast of Booths. The Feast of Booths, the representation of the Lord's return. Let's read about it in Leviticus 23, 34, 35. Say to the people of Israel, on the 15th day of the 7th month, and for 7 days is the Feast of Booths to the Lord. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. 7 days you shall present offerings by fire to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present an offering by fire to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall do no laborious work. Moving on, Deuteronomy 16, 13 to 15. You shall keep the Feast of Booths 7 days, when you make your ingathering from your threshing floor and your winepress. Back to Revelation. You shall rejoice in your feast. This was the one feast that they were told to rejoice. You and your son and your daughters, your manservant and your maidservant, the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow who are within your towns. For 7 days you shall keep the feast to the Lord your God, at the place which the Lord will choose, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you will be altogether joyful. The ingathering from the threshing floor represents the souls coming in just before his return. We're promised that we will be blessed in that. Now let's read from Leviticus 23:39-43. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the produce of the land, you shall keep the feast to the Lord 7 days. The produce of the land has already been gathered in. On the first day shall be a solemn rest, and on the 8th day shall be a solemn rest. And you shall take on the first day the fruit of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord 7 days in the year. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall keep it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All that are native in Israel shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 31:10. At the end of every 7 years, at the set time of the year of release, at the Feast of Booths, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God, at the place which he will choose, you shall read this law before all Israel in their hearing. See, the law is important. It's important clear up to the end of time. Now, looking at the total number of burnt offerings, which you will find if you read Numbers and Deuteronomy and Leviticus, you will find it all listed, but it was too lengthy to put all down. I just totaled everything up. 70 bulls, 14 rams, 98 lambs, 7 goats, taken cumulatively or in groups, was always divisible by 7. On the 8th day, a further 7 lambs plus 1 bull, 1 ram, and 1 goat were offered. Altogether, 199 beasts were slain during this feast, which also the total number of days in a sanctuary year. Now we need to skip back to Daniel and Jeremiah, because this phrase, at the appointed time, is used both in referring to the feast days in the sanctuary and also to end time events. Daniel 8:19, 11:29, Habakkuk 2:3 all refer to and use the phrase at the appointed time, as does Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. Jeremiah 5:24, they do not say in their hearts, let us fear the Lord our God, who gives the rain in its season, the autumn rain and the spring rain, and keeps for us the weeks appointed for the harvest. God has it all under control. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarii, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarii, and do not harm the oil and the wine. That's the last harvest of earth's history. Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is in your midst, a warrior who gives victory. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will renew you in his love. He will exult over you with loud singing, as on a day of festival. The only festival pointed out that was to be rejoiced in. That God said, you shall rejoice in your feast, was the Feast of Booths. This is talking about the end of the world. The Lord your God is in your midst. The Lamb is with us, a warrior who gives victory. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will renew you in his love. He will exult over you with loud singing, as on a day of festival. So, we must also do the calculations for the Feast of Booths, or Tabernacles, which begins 5 days after the Day of Atonement on the 15th day of Tishri. 5 times 33.898 equals 169.49. Added to 1844 equals 2013.49. All right, now we have seen what the calculations are for the Feast of Booths, the antitype of the second coming of Jesus. This is very solemn. Remembering also what Ellen White said concerning the Day of Atonement and the types being fulfilled which relate to the second coming, as pointed out in the symbolic service. People, we are in that day. We should know it by looking around. We should already see it. This we don't need to know the calculations for. It is there. We are there. Now, what do? To prepare for this, do we just sit back and say, now that I know, and I'm good for it? Or do we start filling our lives with the oil of Jesus? Do we seek him? Do we look for him where he may be found? Do we develop a relationship with the Lord that will see us through? Without that relationship with Jesus, we will surely fail. We won't have the strength unless we learn to completely confide in him, to rest all our strength in his hands, that he might fill us with his strength. We won't make it. That is my prayer for each of us as we begin going through this awesome time in Earth's history, that we will prepare here in our hearts to meet the Lord. It is truly an awesome time.